for tuning in once again for another Leaders in Coffee here on Gables Insider. Today we are joined by Miami-Dade County Commission candidate Raquel Regalado, who's a former school board member. Raquel, welcome to Leaders in Coffee.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
So what is your motivation for running for county commission?
Well, first and foremost, I gotta say, I'm a native Miamian. Grew up in Miami, graduated from Coral Gables Senior High, so go Cavs, for those Cavaliers that are watching. And really, it was in high school, I joined the debate team, and I started working for Senator Bob Graham, where I really got interested in politics. Back then, my dad was just like a radio person. For those people who know my family, I come from a radio family, and my father really didn't have an interest in politics. He had been the first Hispanic on the White House press corps and really covered the news. He wasn't the news himself, and I was very interested in politics. My dad decided when he turned 40-something to run for city commission, and he did that. At the time, I was in law school. I went to work at Holland and Knight, and I ran his campaigns, but I really wasn't interested in politics myself until my daughter was diagnosed with autism and my mother passed away and I got divorced, and I ran for the school board in 2010. So I represented Coral Gables at the Miami-Dade County School Board for 2 terms. And in 2016, I resigned my position at the school board to run for county mayor. And now I'm running for county commission because term limits have come up and we're gonna have a dramatic change at the county. So it's really an opportunity to have an entire new generation of people serving on the county commission. And I wanna represent District 7, where I've lived my entire life, on the county commission.
So one of the issues that most affecting Coral Gables is traffic. We're a cut-through city, and transportation as a whole in Miami-Dade County has been an issue for many years. What can be done to improve on that issue?
Well, first and foremost, I think there's 2 important points. When I ran in 2016, I actually submitted a SMART plan that had several revisions, and I criticized Carlos Jimenez's administration for not applying for federal funding, and tried to meet with the other commissioners and talk to them about how we had to focus on ridership. Right after that election, Miami-Dade County actually amended their SMART plan to include my changes. The biggest part of which was taking the Metro Rail to Broward and really focusing on living around transit hubs. So that actually became part of Miami-Dade County's agenda because of the campaign in 2016, and I worked with a lot of commissioners to make sure that they got it right. Miami-Dade County applied for federal funding to take the Metro Rail to Broward. That's a current RFP that's out right now. And we finally saw development around the hubs, specifically 27th Avenue and 37th Avenue are now underway. And obviously we have the underline. Meg Daly has done such a wonderful job. It's a shame that her dad Parker didn't live to see it, but we're opening it soon and we're very excited. So the 2 things, go together, and right now we're seeing an opportunity first to expand transit so that it's more usable, and then also to use the area under transit as the green space that we need in areas in District 7 where green space is just not an option because of development. So I live in Golden Pines, which is between the 27th Avenue and the 37th Avenue Metro Rail station. So I see the Metro Rail, and part of my interest in transit is that I have 2 autistic teens who cannot drive, but they can use public transit. They can walk to the stations, they can bike to the stations, and that's why getting to the stations in different ways is important. And that leads us to kind of the offshoot of that for Coral Gables, which is the Commodore Trail, the Ludlam Path. When we talk about the underline going all the way to Dadeland and then going into the Grove, these are all going to be avenues for us to get to the park, to get to transit, and also to get to the mixed use that's going to be at the stations. When I was on the school board, we had the largest cut in educational funding in the history of the state of Florida. Rick Scott cut our budget by $2 billion, and we had to make dramatic changes. And what I was tasked with was actually changing transit. So I sold our buses, bought new buses, redid our depots, and put over 200 children on Metro Rail. So we picked them up in one place, dropped them off at a Metro Rail station, picked them up at another Metro station, and then took them to the schools. And that's when I started working with the county on transit to see if we can talk about this new generation, like what we call my children, which are like the Uber generation, who, unlike you and me, who ran to the DMV when we turned 16 to get our driver's license, These kids at 20, 22 still don't have a driver's license, and
Right.
we're asking them, for the love of God, to go take the test just in case someone needs you to drive a car.
So on the green issue, Biscayne Bay, we've seen the impacts that it's had over the last few years. Municipalities like Coral Gables have tried to tackle the issue with improving our septic tank issue and also fertilizers. But that fertilizer ban that municipalities are passing is not affecting county properties.
Right.
What would you do to tackle this issue?
Well, first and foremost, so happy to talk about septic to sewer because there's been so much misinformation on the septic to sewer front. I think in this race in particular, we have, two very different views. We're both, supportive of the environment. We both want to protect Biscayne Bay, but, it's one thing to go to a committee and it's another thing to actually do something. In my case, while I was on the school board, I sued BP and I talked about septic to sewer and how Miami-Dade County was not meeting ocean outfall. And because of that, we weren't getting money from the state and from the federal government. What is that? Well, Miami-Dade County still has the practice of taking our sewer water, we clean it with bleach, and we dump it into the ocean. That is part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the leakage that we get from the septic tanks. Now, the good news is that when the Biscayne Bay Task Force started over a year and a half ago, they really focused in on septic. I had talked about septic in 16, and even the Miami Herald criticized me for being obsessed with septic tanks. And my point was that we needed an inspection of septic tanks and to have an idea of how vulnerable these septic tanks were, because as people who have septic tanks know, all you have is the permit and the maintenance that you decide to do. Maybe when you buy the house, you inspect it, but the government really doesn't know what's going on. And my experience in 16 was, and in 17 later on when we continued talking about it, was that a lot of places we went to go inspect the septic tank and there wasn't even a tank there. It was gone at this point and nobody even knew until the property changed hands. So now we have the report, we have the county making it a priority to go septic to sewer, and we also have the city of Miami making it a priority to go septic to sewer. Coral Gables talking about the same thing. But most residents, when they hear septic to sewer, they cringe, right? Because they think of the cost, and the cost is part of the misconception. So 6 months ago, Miami-Dade County got a loan from the EPA to finally comply with ocean outfall. Once we comply with ocean outfall, we can get state and federal funding because we'll be in line with the federal standards for water quality, which, by the way, as many of the attorneys watching know, is a floor, not a ceiling. It's not a good thing that we're not complying with federal standards because federal standards for water quality are so low. So we really are in a very, very bad place in terms of compliance. But now that we meet the ocean outfall requirement, we can apply for state funding. And what will happen is it'll be like a funding lasagna, right? So we'll get state funding, which other counties have gotten, like Monroe and Jupiter. Then we'll have federal funding because we're complying with ocean outfall. And then we're going to have a revenue bond. The revenue bond is a little different than a geo bond because when these people who have septic tanks are now connected to WASA, they're going to bring in revenue. They're going to pay for that service. So we take the amount that they're going to bring to the table and we put it into a bond. There's going to be a small gap for the taxpayer, which then what we would do is spread it out over 20 to 30 years so that you don't have some $30, $40, $50,000, price tag that you have to pay for connectivity. In Coral Gables, there's also a tremendous opportunity, like there are in other areas, to use this time to also bury laterals. For people who have electric lines behind their homes, now that we're doing infrastructure work, we can bury laterals and we can also use this construction moment to enhance access to Wi-Fi, which is another issue that we're having in the Gables, particularly now since everyone is working from home. So what I'm proposing in terms of infrastructure at the county is, first, let's start to educate people about how this process is going to work. We need to start with an inspection process. We need to create task force in the different areas where these septic tanks are so that we can identify other infrastructure issues and do it all at once. Because as you know, Ariel, there's nothing that bothers someone more than tearing up a perfectly good street once or twice or three times because government couldn't get it together and they decided to do infrastructure work within the same time period, closing the roads. So I think there's going to be a great opportunity to do that. And one of the things that will come of this is connectivity, a better conversation with utility lines, and cities and the utility companies in terms of getting work done in an efficient way. And obviously, it'll help property values and it'll make our homes safer, not just for us, but for the environment, because at the end of the day, we're stewards and we're destroying Biscayne Bay. As for the issue with the fertilizer, enforcement. I've been working with the city of Miami, and the city of Miami, like Coral Gables, also proposed this. It's illegal. It's still selling. The only one that is not being sold is Roundup, right? And that's because of issues with cancer and something else. It has nothing to do with the environment. So, when we look at doing it countywide, which we absolutely should do, we need to have a conversation about enforcement. We cannot have these empty mandates anymore, because what good is legislation if we don't have enforcement? So we need to bring in inspectors. We need to talk to the owners of the larger stores and really explain to them that this is about our environment and that we need them to not bring this product in. And then we need to check up on them and make sure they're doing right by our ordinances.
What can we expect from a commissioner, Raquel Regalado?
Well, when I was on the school board, I attended all of the Coral Gables City Commission meetings, and I reported on education. I worked with the commission to eliminate controlled choice because they decided that that was something that wasn't working for Coral Gables residents. I worked very closely with our elected officials and listened to our residents to make sure that we were moving the direction that the city. I'm on the county commission. I'm someone that has been accessible. And I'm going to continue being accessible. I'm going to be at the meetings. I'm very happy to have the support of Vice Mayor Vince Lago and the current Mayor Vande Pauli. And it's really a tremendous opportunity to finally have the cities and the counties working together. I think there's a lot of things that Coral Gables is doing so much better than the county. And that takes us to synchronized lights and all those kind of things, which are so important. Miami-Dade County finally has purchased a program to synchronize lights, and we're looking at jurisdictional issues. But I also want to bring in the school board, because the first time I got involved with synchronization of lights was in 2010, because the county doesn't work with the school district. And as you guys know, which is an issue around Coral Gables K-8 and also around other schools, especially Ponds, those lights are on all the time. They're on the weekends, they're on days off. They've been on during the pandemic, and they create a very chaotic situation. So that's going to be at our top of the list for things to resolve. But for everyone that's watching, what I did at the school board, I would love to do with the county, and I will be respectful and inclusive and try to find solutions and work with our local government. We have a wonderful district, and I think that together we can do wonderful things.
Raquel Regalado, thank you so very much for joining us here on Leaders in Coffee and taking the time to meet with us.
My pleasure. Go Cavs.
And thank you so much for watching. Tune in next time for another Leaders in Coffee here in Gables Insider.